Hey, happy Friday, or whenever you're watching this. This video today, we're talking about emotional wounds, emotional pain inflicted upon Christ prior to his trial. And so this can get overlooked too often. We think about the beating prior to the cross. We think of the cross itself as the main sources of pain, but there's a lot we miss. This is all coming out of Luke 22. I want to talk about the emotional wounds inflicted on Christ. And we want to look at the obvious one and some that are overlooked. There's 3 of them in Luke 22. Also, stick around because I want to talk about how we deal with them and how we walk ourselves through these emotional pains. There are things we're going to feel as well. So if you think of emotional pain, you think of Christ, and you look into Luke 22, the first one's going to be obvious, and that's going to be betrayal. And that's betrayal in itself. It's a breaking of trust, a breaking of confidence, and it's only going to happen if you have a connection with someone. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this is happening by Judas to Jesus, and it's happening because of 2 reasons. One, his fleshly, his human greed, and 2, by Satan. I'm going to read little excerpts out of Luke 22. Verse 3, 4, 5. Satan enters Judas. That's in verse 3. And then verse 4 goes on. Judas then goes to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard. He discusses with him how he might betray Jesus. They're delighted, and they agree to give him money. Moving on, in the midst of the Lord's Supper, after passing the cup, the Son of Man, Jesus says, will go as it's been decreed, but woe to the man that betrays him. That's verse 22. And then you skedaddle all the way to closer to the end of the chapter. Verse 47, Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? The saddest thing about betrayal, and here's why there's such an emotional tear from it. The saddest thing about betrayal is it never comes from an enemy. It comes from someone that we have some sort of relationship with. And I want to talk about those relationships right now. There's 2 types of betrayal. There's a society or a social one and a personal one. A social betrayal generally happens through an expectation or a service. For example, if you're to get a cab or you're to get a driver, you expect them to take you the most direct route, the one that's not going to take the most time or cause the most money. You feel betrayed if you look back and find you've been taken advantage by a driver that took a longer route, charged you more. If you've ever been where there was an expectation, an agreement of what you were going to pay for a service, and then you either did not receive it or you were overcharged, that's betrayal on a societal norm. My favorite way to look at it is the burger of betrayal. You may not know what I'm talking about, but the burger of betrayal is when you see the picture in a menu or on a billboard, then you go and purchase, you exchange your money for that burger, and then you get it and you've been betrayed. You look at the burger and you're like, this is not at all what the picture looked like. It's the betrayal burger. It still might taste good though. And so these are the societal betrayals, okay? They don't hurt as much. They can make you a little bit mad. Some people lose themselves even in those. But the ones that really hurt are personal betrayals. And they can only happen if there is a personal connection there, a level of closeness, a level of intimacy. They can vary, and in that variance of the level of closeness and intimacy, affects how bad the betrayal hurts. So for example, the worst hurt, the worst betrayal generally comes through either a parent or through a spouse. People that have been betrayed by their parents just have this inability to trust anyone. They spend their whole life just failing to trust anyone. Those that have been betrayed by a spouse, generally, a lot of them will just give up on trusting anyone in a relationship, specifically a loving relationship. And betrayal by a spouse happens through emotional or physical affair, and it is the number one heartbreaker, destroys people, and puts them into a pit of darkness and struggle. And we'll talk about that at the end, how to get through that, how to get out of that. Another betrayal happens through friends, happens through close ones. For me personally, I'm betrayed by a tenant, someone that I built up an acquaintance with that was renting a house for me. There was expectations there that were spoken, and then come to find out that they did not hold up those expectations and felt betrayed. So they chose what was easier for them rather than upholding a friendship. And so I was kind of bummed out. Didn't really break my heart, just bummed me out. And one that did break my heart is being betrayed by a member of the church, by being betrayed by someone in the body of Christ. It's more than just a friendly acquaintance. For me, it was a mentor, some you really feel like you're doing life with. And those things hurt, because we've got to recognize this wasn't Christ that betrayed us. This was someone that is in Christ. And so we've got to separate that. But in those terrible betrayals, that when you experience them, there becomes a difference. Because in life, there is hearing the phrase being thrown under the bus, and then there is the experience of the bus driving over top of you. And it's rough. And sometimes you don't recognize it in the moment. You look back and go, wow, that was a bus that ran me over. No one, I don't know, I haven't been hit by a physical bus, but I don't think anyone, while being hit by a physical bus, goes, hey, this is a bus hitting me. They're more in the moment, feeling the pain, the fear, the shock, and all that. Same thing with the emotional bus. Sometimes it's not until it's passed that we look and go, wow, I really got thrown under the bus there. How to describe betrayal, Judas betraying Jesus, those of us that will get betrayed in life. The best way I can think of to describe betrayal, now remember, Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. You don't just go up and kiss people. There is an intimacy, a closeness there. And so I want to articulate the feelings behind betrayal. So betrayal is like getting a knife through your heart, except that it comes through your back while the person is hugging you. And so there's a feeling of embrace and then absolute destruction. And for Jesus, it had to hurt, but at the same time, Jesus knew it was coming. I think that adds a whole nother layer to the problem there. So just the emotional toil of knowing someone you've invested in, knowing someone you've built a relationship with, is going to walk right up and stab you in the back while looking you eye to eye and embracing you with a hug. That's hard. That is hard. And we'll talk about how we get through that in a minute. The second emotional wound inflicted upon Christ. This one you may notice too. Betrayal was the most obvious one. The second one is Peter's denial. Okay? So the betrayal happened by Judas out of Satan's doing, out of greed. You can debate whether all of these are done by Satan, but that's a discussion for another day. But Peter's happens due to fear. So Peter is going to deny, Peter is going to reject Jesus out of fear. Now, here's when denial and rejection happen. I'm going to use those words interchangeably. Denial and rejection. Those happen when someone values something more than you. So on the simplest terms, if you're applying for a job or if you're applying for college and you get rejected, it's because the person values someone else more, and the rejection hurts because all of a sudden we're putting on a scale and we realize we came up short. In Hollywood and movies, you always see this form of rejection where you got these people hanging out, and maybe they're people from different social circles. They form a bond. Maybe it's the nerd and the jock. They bond over some outrageous experience. But then when it comes to them being in their social circles again at school, you see one of them hoping to be embraced, and there's a rejection. The jock, is too busy laughing it up to embrace the other person. So maybe one approaches the other and they're denied. And Peter's denial, I'm going to read real quick here because this is crazy because Peter's words and Peter's actions do not fit. Peter says in verse 33, all of this is coming out of Luke 22, by the way. Have that Bible open. Peter says, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. But Jesus answers him, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you'll deny 3 times that you know me. And then near the end of 22, verse 56, a servant girl saw Peter seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, this man was with him. But Peter denied it. Woman, I don't know him, Peter said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, You are one of them. Man, I am not, Peter replied. And about an hour later, another asserted, certainly this fella was with him, for he is a Galilean. Peter replied, and I think he replies with the veins poking out of his head, with his voice cracking in frustration, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he says this, the rooster crows, and this detail, just the emotion behind this detail in the Bible, in verse 61. The Lord turns and looks straight at Peter. The rejection that happens eye to eye, that scene, that feeling, that moment. Peter remembers the words of the Lord he had spoken to him before the rooster crows. You'll disown me 3 times. Peter goes out and weeps bitterly. Okay? For us, is our value system, as we see with Peter, is it something we say or is it something we do? Now, Peter valued his relationship with Jesus, and he said so. He says, I'm going to follow you to whether we get persecuted, whether we get thrown in prison, whether we get put to death. I'm with you, Jesus. And this is what Peter says. He's boisterous. He's very in tune there. But yet his actions don't follow. And so for us, I want to dive a little bit deeper. Do we claim Christ, watch this, do we claim Christ by our mouth and deny him by our life? Do we say, I love Jesus, but then the actions of our life shows we love something else? And let me explain this. To claim Christ, to claim a trust of Christ, say, God, I love you. God, I know you. God, I claim you. We say that, but then we live out of a place of fear, anxiety, and worry. So we say trust, but we don't live as one that trusts. And I hope you recognize that. In a place of fear, anxiety, and worry, we're not trusting God. Another way is to claim to love Christ. So with my lips I speak, I love you, God. I love you, Jesus. But yet I live in willful, unrepentant sin. So I say I love Christ, but the things I do not show that I love Christ. Because Jesus says, the words of Jesus says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And his commandments in the simplest forms are to love God, love people. And I think the sin that comes before that, and we're going to talk about it in depth a little bit, is loving ourselves more than we love God, than we love people. And then another thing is we claim Christ as Lord. And so when we claim Christ as Lord, he is to govern over us, he is to control us. So we claim him as Lord, we claim him as King, but yet we live where we are controlled by the eyes, the desires, and the demands of the world around us. So we speak Christ as Lord, but we live enslaved to the world. And it's scary stuff. And this isn't just me dealing with it, moving along in the notes here, but I think there is something we have to be aware of in denial, in rejection, in the emotional toil. Do the things we say match up with the things we do? And the emotional betrayal Jesus has in Luke 22, because Peter says one thing and Peter does something else. The third, emotional hurt. This one can be quickly missed. And in fact, I was going to make this video on 2 emotional wounds, but there's one kind of tucked in here, and it is a little bit harder to find. But in a way, I think this one could hurt the most. So he gets betrayed by by Judas. Gets denied by Peter. But the one I want to speak of that I think is hidden there, and I don't know the best way to describe this other than self-love, and it happens by the disciples, that they show and they emotionally hurt Jesus by loving themselves more than Christ. And it's tucked in verse 24. So we've had Jesus breaking bread, passing the cup. He speaks that someone here is going to betray me. And the disciples pour into this. In verse 24, a dispute arose among them as to which of them was considered to be the greatest. The timing of this is ridiculous. The disciples are ridiculous. We are at the intimate moment where Jesus is symbolically breaking bread and passing the cup, something that we share in remembrance of him, and immediately the disciples are bickering over who's the best. Just the absurdity is, in a way, is almost hysterical. Like, we want to laugh, but we are people too, and this is showing us how failed and how flawed not only people are, but the people closest to Jesus were. The disciples love themselves out of this weird sense of cockiness, out of self-elevation. I look at it this way, and I want to read a little bit more. Verse 25, Jesus said to him, "The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as one who serves." He's setting the example. "You are those that have stood by me in my trials. I confer on you a kingdom, just as my Father conferred on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on the thrones." He is trying to get across the understanding of this upside-down kingdom. He continually speaks and he shares throughout his ministry about humility. And what we have here is, I want to use words that start with the same letter because I'm a preacher and I'm required to. Jesus preaches humility. The disciples are haughty. They are in this place of haughtiness, while Jesus is speaking to them about being humble, about speaking humility. Haughty is to be full of self, to care only of self. And directly, I want to back into Luke 9. And this is where this emotional hurt comes from, because all this time Christ is speaking to them about caring for others, looking to the needs for others, loving others. And most directly, he says unto them, Luke 9, verse 23, "Whoever wants to be my disciple," if you guys want to be around this table with me, if you guys want to follow me, this is what he says, and this is exactly what they don't do. He says, "You must deny yourself." If you want to follow me, if you want to be my disciple, you got to take a step down. You've got to deny yourself. And here they are, while he is trying to symbolically lay this out for the foreseeable future, to have a place of remembrance for them. They are bickering over who is the greatest, who can step up rather than who can take a step down in the name of Christ. I'll read this section out of Luke 9. "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his glory, and the glory of the Father and the holy angels." We can't get to carrying our cross, and we can't get to following Jesus if we don't first deny ourselves. Jesus has spent all this time with these guys. He is at this moment. He's in a place of desperation. He's emotionally overcome by the betrayal that is about to happen, by the denial that he foresees coming. And I think the thing that is the most hurtful is that all this time he has spent with them, they are denying it with the way they are acting about elevating themselves. They're completely blind to the place of humility, and they're seeking who can be the highest amongst them. I want to relate these things to us. We will likely, because we're human, we will be betrayed at some time. We will be denied, rejected at some time. And at the same time, while this is different because we are not Lord's, we are not Christ, we are going to be in a place where we find people truly only care about themselves. And all of these things, they lead to a dark emotional state. I heard a psychologist call this the underworld, which I thought was very fitting, because we feel these emotional pains and we kind of bury ourselves deep And how it happens is through this. We're shocked by it happening. That come from people close to us. And then we're a mixed part hurt and angry. And those hurts and those angers boil into different places. They either boil into frustration and rage or a bitterness and resentment. And then they are played out. If we don't watch ourselves, they're played out in revenge or attacks or other ways of trying to hurt those who hurt us. You see this all the time. You see someone that's rejected going out of their way to reject the one that rejected them, or to speak down or defame. Imagine someone speaking up about the college they really wanted to get into, and then they get rejected. What do? They trash talk the school. Okay. Imagine someone getting denied by someone they thought they were on equal level with. What are they going to do? They're going to talk bad about that person. They're going to just do what they can to berate them. At the same time, a spouse or someone that is rejected or hurt, they seek a way to heal, and generally it's by trying to hurt the other one, or they fall into this place of trying to medicate that hurt by addictions, by just trying to cover themselves with different things. It's terrible. But there is a way that we can overcome. There is a way that God has in store for us. You are going to get hurt. You're going to go through these things, and there's a right way and a wrong way to go through them. The wrong way is hurting someone, even if that person is yourself. And the right way to overcome these things is, and I want to say this and then hopefully it makes sense, the way to overcome emotional pain is to adjust your values. I don't mean that in you stop loving people. I don't mean that in you stop caring about people. But I mean you adjust your values in that you set your eyes upon Jesus. And so what people are going to fail you. If we value people above God, we will always be hurt. We will always be in pain. Even the people of Christ, even the people of the church will hurt us. But if we adjust our values and we always set God as King, always set God as Lord, always set Christ in command of our lives, we recognize that He is the same today, tomorrow, and for eternity. That His grace, His mercy is sufficient. And forgiveness for people will only come with our eyes on the Father and not on the fault that those people cause. So I want to get us to an understanding of a cycle, how we get through emotional pain, how we get through emotional torment. This cycle that I see, that I found, comes from Psalm 130. And here's where it is. It's I'm going to expand it and then I'll keep it simpler. First is I've been hurt. This is that dark underworld emotional pain that I've been through, whether it was through rejection, denial, whatever happened. I'm hurt. I'm stung. Okay? Then a recognition that God is God. He is loving. He is merciful. He is gracious. I've been hurt, but God is God. The third one is that this hurt will not last because God's love endures forever. The pain is temporary. The pain's stuck in this world. The pain will not last forever. And the fourth thing is that we are not the only ones going through this. We are not the only ones getting hurt. And more than likely, we will eventually be someone that hurts others. And so the cycle from Psalm 130 is, I've been hurt. You are God. This hurt will not last. And I'm not the only one. Another way of putting it, if you read through Psalms 130, in the first two verses, this is where I am. Verses 3 and 4, but this is who you are. Verses 5 and 6, this will not last. Verses 7 and 8, I'm not the only one. This is where I am. This is who you are. This will not last. And I'm not the only one. Southgate, friends, family, I know emotional hurt is either where you're at right now or it's coming. There's no ifs or ands about it. I hope you know how to get through it. I hope you know how to set your values straight. And I hurt for you because I know emotional pain is real. And I know it is not really fun. But I hope we focus our eyes on God and we recognize the pain, the turmoil, the emotional hurt Christ walked through in Luke 22. Love you guys. Hope you're doing well. And hope you have a great weekend. See ya.